Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very nice start to a great day. It is a wet day in Gurgaon and in NCR, possibly a weather which everyone likes. And I think we want to make it very fiery with none other than Mr. Sanjay Dutt. Welcome, everyone. I do hope that by the time we conclude our discussions with Sanjay, uh, we will all go enlightened by the powerhouse he is, not just from the perspective of the energy which he exudes from every day and every moment you spend with him, but with the huge knowledge which he possesses across the sector. And I think we possibly will actually get benefited from a perspective of a professional body as well, to try and understand what is that we should be doing to make sure that we create a lasting difference in the built environment sector. Just to basically tie up some housekeeping issues, by default, everyone is on mute. There is a question tab on the right hand side of everyone's chat box. You can type your questions over there. The way we have structured the entire discussion, we have a total of 90 minutes, and that's so generous of Sanjay over here to give us 90 minutes. Of which 60 minutes will be the my set of questions, which I would love to hear from him directly, and then 30 minutes are for audience. And I'm sure I already have been receiving questions from the audience, Sanjay. So I'm looking forward to possibly more questions from the audience than I've been able to pull together for yourself. But just to give everyone an introduction of Sanjay, which I think he possibly does not need a formal introduction, so I'll try and do an informal one. Sanjay's mantra, as aptly shared on his LinkedIn profile, says, whatever you do, be exceptional. And he's surely exceptional. Great simplifier, one who cuts through arguments, debates, and any doubts to offer a solution that everyone is pleased with. But that's just the surface of a man, surface of a leader who's so diverse and multifaceted. On the surface, hobbies and interests may appear to have nothing to do with leadership, but if you dig a little deeper, you see the correlations between what people like Sanjay do there on in their downtime and what he does as leader on the job. So just to give you some semblance of what Sanjay is all about, and I'm sure some of the younger generation who's listening to this will get quite excited of how he invests his time in business and on his own quality engagement. So in the downtime, in the lockdown, he has been learning to play the guitar when COVID hit, an indication of always pushing the boundaries and taking on new challenges. An avid jewelry designer showcasing creativity and flair, cooking mutton and sabudana khichdi being his specialities. And I'm not sure if you know, but Amitabh Bachchan has khichdi as his speciality and his favorite as well, showing being close to the ground and one's ability to roll one's sleep and getting things done. He's an avid biker, thriving on the thrill and experience of being in control, and that's where leadership on the edge comes into picture. Travel enthusiast, someone who can plan the journey and enjoy it for what it is. And I'm sure Amish and Ashwarya have gone on live saying that what Sanjay is all about in that. So with between me and Sanjay, we have three sections. The segment one is about knowing Sanjay better, more from personal and his historical perspective. Segment two will be talking a bit of business, which I don't want to lose an opportunity to dig into Sanjay's or dip into Sanjay's deep knowledge which he has. And segment three will be final take, which could possibly be more of a rapid fire, but I'm sure there will be a lot of things which will come out of it. So for everyone's benefit, Sanjay, I think the first and foremost thing is, I mean, there is a huge, more than 2.5 decades of journey behind you. I mean, what made you choose built environment? How did you get to where you are today?
I refer to my conversation in the management program where I was discussing right at the cusp of my entrepreneurial stint. And at that time, I was winding up my business and I wanted to embark on a new journey. And the following conclusions were made. Yeah, so I was saying during my early days in the management program and having learned my entrepreneurial stint part, I realized that I needed to be in services sector in the high margin business because profitability does matter. and also it gives you an opportunity to interact with decision makers and key people. So it increases your knowledge, and I did that. And I came across the opportunity at that point of time, which was then called Richard Ellis. Uh, so the joke was, if I want to be in high value industry, perhaps the best is to be in arms dealing, because that's probably the most valuable. But obviously that was beyond my scope. The second was investment banking, which clearly I was not a banker. And the third, which came across to me because I was doing a lot of investment opportunities in real estate at that time, uh, Rich Dallas, now called CBRE, Anshuman Magazine, was kind enough to make me as part of the initial team. And that's how my journey started, Dinesh.
Wow. Wow, Sanjay. And what an illustrious journey from that point onwards till this. So, which is one thing which makes you maximum proud in this entire journey, Sanjay?
I believe, the most obvious ones are sector knowledge, experience, skills, which are of course given, which without which you will not excel in any business. But the single most valuable, you know, that I have amassed over a period of time are the deep relationships and bonds that I've been able to create with my colleagues, with my family, with my friends, and my clients who now are friends. And that happened because uh, I actually wanted to be their well-wisher. So irrespective of what you do, uh, the human-to-human relationship is really extremely valuable to me. And even though there was no purpose, no agenda, I always gave a very high weightage to human value and human relationships. And whether that person is peon of the office or the chairman or indeed the director, the weightage for me would be equal to all of them. And I would have the same weightage to a customer. And when I look back and I realize that I can now pick up a phone and speak to somebody without any hesitation across the country, across the segments, and they are always there to help me, because no successful entrepreneur leader can become a leader unless he or she has groomed leaders below them. And I think those leaders are the ones that make you a success. And I feel very, very fortunate that I was always surrounded by people who were far more intelligent than me, equally committed, and maybe is more committed. And they made the difference to me. And I attribute my entire success to all those people.
So that's truly Sanjay, the most humble Sanjay, which I've always come across. When he says he can pick up the phone and talk to anyone, let me tell you, it is the same privilege which I enjoy with Sanjay. I can pick up the phone and speak to him and try and pour my heart out and possibly pick up his brains on something. But sir, this humility, is that inborn, or that is acquired because you have traveled such a great distance and become a kind of a person who people idolizes to become in their lives?
I believe in India we're very fortunate that the middle class society and the simple society, the value system in our country has always been very high. And I think I was fortunate to be part of that. My parents gave me that foundation. And then when you really look at some of the most successful leaders who have established businesses, not just themselves as the first time entrepreneurs, but maybe a second, third, and fourth generation. If you look at those people, the reason that the second, third, fourth generation is still successful is because they have given the same values and transferred those and kept those as the most important for the success. So let's look at Tata Group, for example.
Right.
150 years of legacy. This could not have happened if they had not consistently been strong on the values, vision, commitment, and the charitable cost which is embedded in the whole culture of the organization. And so when you interact with such, and there are many other such, the takeaway for somebody like me is once you do good deeds, the rest will automatically will follow. And I've been a beneficiary of that to a large extent, although in my modest way, obviously, I still have some more steps to achieve and accomplish, but I feel quite content that what I envisaged, I've more than accomplished, and I feel, grateful and respected all those people who helped me achieve that.
Thank you, Sanjay. And that brings me to one very exciting question over here, which troubles my younger generation, which I interact with them, Sanjay. Sanjay, when you joined the built environment sector, there was possibly a need to go around on the roads, be on the roads, make sure that you were basically, there was possibly a lesser segregation between a blue collar and a white collar at that point of time. What is your take on that? What was that experience like, and what is that you would want the younger generation to understand from this, that sometimes you will have to sweat it out to make sure they get there eventually to where people like Sanjay are able to?
When I first mentioned to my father that after doing a management program that I'm joining real estate developments or real estate consulting, the experience and the interaction was somewhat subdued. It was not very encouraging because the sector was unorganized. But it was the clear line of sight that India is progressing towards liberalization, development, and growth. I saw that as an opportunity that eventually it would. And it was that commitment that I took. And, I met my father, who's, God bless, is now 91 years old.
Wow.
And I met him in Delhi very recently. And he said, I'm very proud of you. You are one of the finest professional in real estate. And he said it unprovocatively. I mean, I was just surprised at why he's saying it. He felt very proud, and I felt great because recognition from your father or your parents is probably the ultimate recognition. So that sea change in his perception perhaps happened not because real estate sector is doing great or not great, or was organized or unorganized, or blue collar or white collar, is basically whether you are excelling in whatever that you chose in your career. And as long as you are able to demonstrate that you can excel, it could be any sector and any job. But definitely, I think we are still at a very nascent stage of a built environment. The sector is just getting organized. And now you will see the scale, the transaction values, the growth will be exponential. And therefore, all the professionals joining the built environment, and they're joining perhaps in the most difficult times. The fact that they will go through this difficult time, they will have more resilience and more grip on how to navigate through difficult times, and will make them stronger professionals, in my opinion. So they are set out for success because if they're able to navigate through this period, they have a huge runway ahead in terms of their career and growth.
Thanks a lot, Sanjay. So, continuing with that question, I mean, in that overall period of time, Sanjay, what was the most important risk you took and why? I'll start where I left. So, in that overall instance, and I'm so glad to hear that your father himself has been able to witness and finally feels proud of you. And Sanjay, as you rightly said, I think nothing can be a better testament than getting that testimony from your own parents that you have achieved something in your life. Otherwise, a kid is a kid till the time the parents are there. So, if I ask that question, Sanjay, what was the most important risk you took in your career and why? While you said real estate was something and you had done it, you had done an MBA, which could have taken you to multiple places and various areas. But in this case, what actually made you go there?
I believe it was just natural instinct when it came to investment and real estate, which I started in 92, 93. And that gave me a very good confidence in terms of that I can actually be, uh, exploring this. But it was a very clear principle in my life that I will always work for the top companies only. And the reason was because I wanted to learn things. And fortunately for me, that opportunity came through Richard Ellis. And as you know, throughout my career, I've tried to kind of learn from the top companies in their respective spaces. So I did that. So that was one. Second, clearly was I was born and brought up in Delhi, Nimish, but I always believe that if you really want to gain knowledge of real estate, you have to be at least in three hubs of this country. So I got the opportunity to move to Mumbai, which immediately after 1 year of marriage was a challenge for me. And
Right.
immediately the first child was a challenge for me to reestablish myself in a new city. uh, was very helpful. And then, as you know, subsequently in my career, I also moved to Bangalore and I've worked in Bangalore for 2 years. And despite these three hubs, I've been actively engaging in many other cities across the country. And I feel no matter how challenging this was, after covering a journey over 27 years, this has been one of the biggest asset because unless you know the cultural differences, the diversity that we keep talking about, unless you respect those diversities, you would not be able to understand the needs and will not be able to offer the solutions that you need to in the real estate space. So I think that was one big challenge. The other challenge was all about it was hard work. The information was difficult to get. It was very unorganized. And so you had to probably innovate every time. I have stood in the field of sugarcane in Pune, which
Wow.
got converted into IT parks and SEZs and townships. I've stood in the office of a contractor wanting to be a developer, or or a friend who wanted to start a small business and now has a listed real estate development company. Uh, and I've been very fortunate that this period of growth and liberalization in India gave me the opportunity to play a role, a meaningful role here, beside building businesses and real estate consulting enterprises, or now managing projects across the length and breadth of the country. So I feel these were some of the most hardships which have helped shape my career. The other thing, Nimish, I want to tell everybody, for some reason, I've always had job changes during the downturn. So for some reason, it was accidental. But when I look back and I see that I took a challenge at the worst time of the sector that actually made me work harder and appreciate the challenges better and innovate and adapt to deliver solutions. And that, if you go through these difficult times, like I was saying earlier, can make a world of difference to you in shaping your behavior, your approach, and your ability to adapt in difficult times, which now I can say happening more frequently than it did in the past. And therefore, you need to be able to adapt and challenge yourself. And if you can exceed your own expectation, that probably is the best that one can aim for.
Wow. Well said, Sanjay. Exceeding one's own expectation. I think that's a statement which is going to stick to me, Sanjay. Sanjay, the entire world looks up to you for inspiration or mentorship. Who do you look up to?
Uh, the most this is a very difficult question to answer, but I've had my own heroes. I've seen a lot of people over the years who have exceeded their own performances. And I've done that. I think one aspect of life that I look up to is some of my own case studies. I
Right.
remember there are many things that these are situations, so not people. And situations throw the biggest challenge to you.
Wow.
So if you're able to overcome the challenge, they act as your biggest motivator for the rest of your life. So when I'm feeling low, when I'm feeling down, and I go back in history and see, if I could overcome this, that during this journey, uh, I feel energized and positive that I can overcome. But clearly, one of the hobbies I've had, I used to actually collect the annual general body meet speeches of leaders. I used to collect them. And I used to collect them because they were able to articulate beautifully in a very short period of time the vision, the performance, the growth, and the changes and the challenges that a company has delivered. And many sectors over the years have remained challenged, and how those leaders have been able to overcome. And there are many such leaders. One cover page of a magazine which inspired me, it has nothing to do with the individual, but it has to do all with the statement which was made, and that was, people think, I act. And I think this has been presented in many different forms and shapes.
It is.
The most important thing is to be able to, act on what you believe in, and you have the courage of facing the failure. So if you have the courage of facing the failure, the chances would be that you would succeed eventually. Because if you're courageous enough to face the failure, you'll eventually be able to succeed. And I think it is things like these and events like these and statements like these which have inspired me. And I think you can be a hero of your own if you overcome the challenges. And I think all of us individually take a lot of inspiration from what we have accomplished and overcome, or we are overcoming every day.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think that's a great one. Great takeaway again for me. Sanjay, one last personal thing before we move on to business. I mean, you generally travel a lot, and I've seen that your family themselves are becoming leaders in their own right. I see that they are achieving a lot in what they're trying to do. So, how do you balance between their expectations or between work and the family?
Very simple rule. Friday evening onwards to the weekend, I'm only with my family. And in between, if anybody wants to meet, my family is with me. So that rule
Oh,
I've followed for over 24 years of my marriage. And I must admit, if it wasn't for my wife and children who accommodated me between Monday and Thursday, I wouldn't have been able to succeed. And and of course uh, the culture of being available at all times when the emergency strikes. So that's clearly what I would attribute to. And I think the organization culture now is such that you need to now build high performance organization. There is no scope for mediocrity. There is
true.
no scope for, I will handle this later. It has to be done now. Uh, I've spoken earlier, agility, speed uh, can make all the difference to the performance of the individual and the organization.
Sanjay, one last question for the younger generation who's listening to you over here. What, according to you, should be the work-life balance formula for these guys? Not for you, but for these guys who are
I,
possibly the
I
people who are
believe that
getting into the industry.
yeah, I believe a professional has broadly three phases: the learning phase, the stabilization phase when you're making use of your learnings, and then there's a phase of achieving excellence. I personally believe it pays very high dividends if you in the learning phase, uh, even if you lose a little bit of work-life balance in favor of work and hard work, because the economic environment and the sectoral challenges across any sector are so severe that unless you devote yourself entirely in the learning phase, the chances of your maturity and the excellence phase would be limited. That's one. And that could be, each one of us can have a different learning phase in terms of years. If you can achieve early, great. I think during your family or maturity phase, if you're able to strike some work-life balance, which I believe perhaps I did not give attention to, and I think most of our generation was subject to struggle mode. Even now, back in those days in 80s, the opportunities, employment opportunities were very limited. And there was a kind of a fight for securing a good job or a government job or a private sector job. And I have still that struggle mode even today, even though you reasonably covered your life and you have enough means to sustain yourself, but that mode is still there. And I think that is what it is, building the muscles of your body and the brains at that stage, which is important, because then you can sustain it for a longer period without it. And if you, once you reach the maturity, you do that, I believe during the stage of your excellence, a combination of your personality development, personality traits, and the period of learning and maturity, which you can take it to the next level using your skills and experience, you can actually maintain some balance. And that at that time, if you're at the leadership stage, it is very important that you do, because the goal is to have a healthy, fulfilling, and satisfying life. And every other aspect is a means to achieve it, as we all know. But
Thanks a lot, Sanjay.
most of it we know it later than earlier. So I think that's what younger generation seems to be smart about it already, that I know.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think well said, well spotted there. Well, I'll move into the next section, Sanjay, which is basically talking business. So we know that there is a situation of macroeconomic factors which are basically still showing a recessive approach in the overall economic situation. So, what is the biggest challenge which you believe is the country facing today? Is it the primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector, or possibly mix of it? Or there are basic wrongs with macroeconomics, or if the government needs to do little more to elevate the overall sectoral situation over here?
I believe this is the first time in the history of India, and I can take example of real estate to begin with, but it's common to every other sector, that for the first time, structural changes, regulatory reforms, sectoral setbacks and disruptions, technology disruption, digitization disruption, and the scale that has happened in the last 2 or 3 decades. We saw it globally, and that's why M&As have gone up. That's why the size of the companies is becoming larger and larger. And the same thing is happening in India, which basically means consolidation. So too much competition, too much excessive speculation without enough financial and business discipline, things have fallen apart. It is our own doing. It has nothing to do with the economy, etc., etc. If businesses, traditionally businesses had the ability to absorb setbacks.
Yeah.
You would not hire and fire people,
Right.
because the companies were financially strong enough to be able to absorb and then bounce back. Today, any shock destroys the business.
True.
So that's something which I believe can only happen when the consolidation happens and this speculation drive across the sector reduces. So
Right.
that's really, it is the same way that everybody now is investing in gold and therefore prices are going up. During insecurity, uh, people go for gold, uh, or during profit booking in equity markets, people go for property. There is such predictable human behavior that it sets us for failure. One can
Right.
take a view of contrarian, but even that has its own downsides. So that's really one. And I believe overall, somewhere the overall comprehensive landscape which needs to be done. For example, let's take India. We privatize, we built a great built environment. We have 650 million square feet of office. We have retail, we have warehousing growing, but somehow the infrastructure has come much later or is still yet to come. So we need to make sure that the sequence, the regulatory environment, the infrastructure, and then the development, and then the marketing, that gets done. Somehow we have missed the big
Right.
picture, both as a government and as businesses. And then in the final stages, you can now take it for granted that unless you have high governance, high compliance, high financial discipline, and credibility and track record, you would not succeed. And that was somewhat, I believe, was ignored in the past, and now it
Right.
has come back, and I think will play a major role at a very macro level, Nitish.
Yeah.
Nimesh.
So, Sanjay, no worries, sir. Sanjay, do you think the developers are still in a position to think out of box because they're still trying to follow a similar herd mentality? If someone, let's say, if I talk about data centers also today, Sanjay, everyone is trying to rush towards data center without thinking that what is the kind of feasibility studies we have there put in place. And I know for talks between you and me, which I have had, you have been pretty selective about how you want to basically develop your business. So is there a community of developers who are still who are able to think out of box and trying to create a difference in the overall real estate sector right now?
If I was to give a simple answer, the answer is no, because the majority has failed in this space. There will always be some exceptions, Nimish, which we have seen in the market.
Right.
But the most important thing is, has the government taken note of this?
Yeah.
Have they changed the height FSI consumption?
Right.
Have they taken into account the quality and extent of power needed?
Right.
Have they ensured that the power is at a cheaper cost for data
Right.
centers? Um, to ensure that they're incentivized, and the quality of fiber connectivity is so important. So if those things have not happened, then you being able to successfully rolling out a business would be very difficult. And then of course the expertise to build, design and execute and subsequently manage. India has built beautiful buildings, but over the years they built very limited capability to manage the assets. So you will
Right.
see fancy buildings being delivered, but over a period of time, the deterioration is just too much. And I think that's where we need to focus, and that's where we have failed. But I believe the privatization or institutionalization or the private equity players and the corporate sector playing in will bring this culture of quality and investing in learning and development, which will eventually benefit the sector.
So a question on infrastructure side, Sanjay, and I know that you wear multiple hats anyways. With so much focus on NIP and promoting local businesses, do you think that the infra industry is geared up to respond? And there is a positive rub-off on real estate. Do you think the RE industry is rewriting their business plans accordingly with respect to NIP being planned, whether it is this is Bharatmala or Sagarmala? Are the real estate developers taking account of what they should be doing, whether they should be looking at more industrial warehousing kind of a real estate or some other thing? So what's your take on that?
Very candidly, Nimesh, developers are looking at cash flow. They're looking at how to remain solvent. They're looking at how to make sure the next installment to the bank goes on time. So clearly they are overwhelmed by
Right.
this. Obviously, it also gives an opportunities for organized players to take advantage of this and leapfrog in this growth. And that's what, for example, Tata Realty, Tata Housing is looking at doing. So we're looking at that, and some of us are the beneficiary of this, but majority perhaps is busy mending challenges which they encountered last few years. So I think that's where they're struggling. But I believe in next 2 to 3 years, after the dust settles, you will see a new picture emerging, far more resilient, far more crisp and clear, and the players in the market will have far more resilient business models that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 decades. And you will see many local developers also, Nimish, who have professionalized their businesses as much as corporate developers have done. And that will also be making a big contribution to the sector.
Thank you. Sanjay, in my chats with you, you have often told that you wanted to make sure that you are present in those areas. And as you said, your focus was on high margin business and making sure that those products do successfully well. And you were looking at some sort of consolidation also of Tata's footprint and not being spread all over for the namesake, but being there. So in
Yes.
that perspective, Sanjay, is there enough and reliable research available in the market for businesses and industry to benefit for in their decision making processes?
I believe so, yes. Now we
Okay.
have research firms, organization like RICS and top consulting firms. In addition to this, now you have NCLT data points, you have NPA data points, you have
Right.
stuck project data points, and you have distress fund data points and
Right.
asset reconstruction data points to give you enough idea of the landscape and the demand supply dynamics, which perhaps earlier were ignored.
All right. All right, Sanjay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. That is a good one. Sanjay, a very candid question to you, and this is something because you are now one of the signature or a poster child of the real estate industry also.
Thank you. You're very
Despite
generous.
you being despite you being there and the brands like Tata being there, why still real estate industry labeled as unprofessional and opaque by general? If you look at general, I mean, we all know what is that we are trying to do with RERAs coming into picture. There is still a concern about unprofessionalism, opacity, and is the younger crop from professional institute, are they changing the landscape? Is the younger generation trying to change the poor image of the sector?
I believe the landscape has completely changed. It's in the
Mhm.
process. It's not complete. Uh, I believe after these structural reforms, whether they are,
Yeah,
and
please
perhaps
come back.
they may not be compliant and adhere to or met customer expectations overall. But the projects which are being launched now and the developers who have taken notice of these structural reforms and they're gearing up their organization to meet these will help change this negative perception of the real estate sector. And I believe the central government has done a tremendous job in bringing reforms and increasing transparency, and that is what has caused to increase in foreign direct investment in real estate. Definitely, REITs is a very good example that we've seen nearly 50 million square feet listed and doing
Right.
well, and another 100 million getting ready to be listed by next year. And many investors eyeing that opportunity and more. So let's assume 300 to 400 million square feet in his not so distant future. Uh,
Wow.
is a is an endorsement that these structural changes are set for good. So that's one takeaway, in my opinion. At the same time, I've seen family offices and corporate developers restructured their own organizations to cope with these changes, which over a period of 2 3 years, you will see the processes will be smoothened because there is a lot of disruption, which I mentioned earlier. it has caused a disrupted space for them. So they're not able to settle down because of
Right.
these continuous disruptions and now COVID-19. But I believe over next 2 to 3 years, you will see a remarkable change. One area which I believe definitely needs a substantial structural reform is at the state level.
Mhm.
So policy changes is done. I believe the day single window clearance will happen at the state level, and your environment and building and town planning department will approve your drawings online in less than 30 days or less than 60 days. That will be the day when you can say the sector's perception will change dramatically. So the government has to now play its role. So the central government has done, the developers are doing, the investors are regulated under FDI and other policies. Construction is as per NBC norms. Now state governments have to become part of Real Estate Regulation Act. If the RERA gets applied on state governments and they subject themselves to the same discipline, that would really make uh, the sector change dramatically. And I think the developers' perception is already beginning to change, and then the whole sector perception will change.
Sanjay, I mean, as part of FICCI, you're chair of FICCI as well, and you chair RICS as well. Plus, you represent various other industry bodies as well. I know you have been meeting the chief ministers of the states also, and the point which you touched is basically Achilles' heels to most of the developers. You know, I mean, most of them are suffering through this. Uh, Even though we know that there is a symbiotic relationship in the urban local bodies which desists from changing their age-old approach, is there not a kind of a stick-based approach which government is trying to take either at the central government level or the state government level, so that they can straighten up the departments in possibly one go through a reform like RERA or through a reform like bring in some transparency in the systems of approvals so that they can get an expeditious approval?
It's a good point, and it's a very good question. I believe, first of all, the various precedents that have been set through the process of judicial system is making the entire built environment accountable, whether they
Mhm,
are stakeholders as government or
mhm.
developers or investors or even consumers who have lately tried to perhaps take advantage of consumerism uh,
Right.
to some extent. Uh, I think that is one. Secondly, in my recent interaction, and I say recent last 2, 3 years, I've seen a lot of young bureaucrats
Mhm.
who are genuinely committed for change. And I
Right.
see across the country where some departments we don't face any obstruction. In fact, they are very cooperative and very flexible. They listen to the industry. For example, you must have seen Maharashtra state,
Yeah.
they reduced stamp duty and they're evaluating how you can make it better. They have changed the premium norms and they reduced the ready reckoner rates. So they're more proactive. I see that some reflections in Haryana. I know Chhattisgarh government perhaps is the one state which is already providing single window. And
Mhm.
many states during invest forums, they provide single window. So if they can provide during Vibrant Gujarat and Invest Maharashtra forums, why can't they extend that same facility during the period of remaining 11 months? So I think there is a strong change that I'm beginning to see, but there is also a lot of resistance from the old school, which perhaps need to give way, but they enjoy the position of power or lack of will, perhaps, which needs to be kind of addressed. I believe it will only take its own time and it won't happen overnight.
Right. Sanjay, coming back to your organizational perspective over here, and you said that you believe in creating more leaders below you to make sure that the organization sustains. You did say it that you want to hire brighter people than you, but that's a controversial question whether we will be able to get a brighter person than Sanjay himself. But yeah, uh, going by that spirit, Sanjay, what is the emphasis you have on professional development within your organization, whether it is mapping professional growth to competencies and then encouraging people to be continuously upskilling and upgrading themselves?
First of all, as we all know, India needs to attach a lot of weightage to diversity, and not
Right,
just gender diversity, but also geographical diversity. I think in the
right,
mainstream business, we have very few people from the eastern region of India or
right,
hilly region of India,
right.
Himachal, Uttaranchal, Mizoram, Nagaland, Assam. So those diversities. Then it's the culture of sustainability, which now is increasingly coming through. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the most important part is the culture. Uh, I believe somehow the Western style of management, which is now the benchmark of institutionalization, because the Indian entrepreneur style of management is very different, as you know.
Yeah,
The single leader, and
yeah,
that single works very effectively.
right,
But once you want to institutionalize the business, which is what large organizations are forced to do,
true,
uh, that's the time when the challenges you face. And that can only come when you build a culture, and the culture of collaboration. The personality traits of the individual should be that they should respect each other's view,
right,
even if they have disagreement. They should respect the other's opinion and
right,
collectively find a solution which serves the larger interests of the organization. So
right.
those value systems and culture is what I would give highest weightage to. I have seen over last 27 years the most competent, the most skillful, the most intelligent failing despite all those, because the cultural traits and the personality traits were not conducive.
True.
And the significance of this is just extremely high. And I think that is one that I would promote extensively. We spoke about challenges and disruptions happening, and we spoke about digitization to some extent. All of these are bringing substantial changes in how the businesses are going to function going forward. So if you're not going to adapt, change, and learn, you will be left out quite clearly. And I think this generation gets it. Uh, is at what speed are you willing to adapt and change will decide your future. So I would say these few.
First time I met you, you said, Nimish, the winner is someone who's going to go the technology way, and that's something which has been completely etched in my mind. Do you think COVID has leapfrogged us in the technology adoption in the sector? Is the market geared up to understand the massive opportunity presented in prop tech, construtech, and other modern technologies for the built environment sector, and technologies like BIM or virtual construction? So, in your overall take, Sanjay, this was long before COVID happened. You always talked about technology. What is your take for generally the industry and to the younger people who will be listening to us?
A very important point. I believe successful businesses will be those which analyze data, the analytics, the artificial intelligence will be built in, because various triggers happen when some violations happen in your business principles. Let's say debt equity ratio. Now, if
Right.
there is a SPV where the sales are down and you're likely to breach because of low cash flow, that should be an indication for a management team to step in, immediately and take preventive measures to bring the business on track.
Hmm.
And use of technology will help us do that. Uh, First of all, you know that the real estate sector is under tremendous margin pressure, just like many other businesses. And technology enables in contracting the construction cycle, whether through, you know, 3D precast or steel structures or whatever, or drones, every other possible tool and technology available to us. all of that will expedite the development. That itself means savings in times, and cost of debt, which I've repeatedly said is the highest in the world, which it has to be low. So cost of capital
Right.
being high, you have no choice but to spend time on reducing the construction cycle or a business cycle. And I believe technology can play a very, very important role in this. And then comes the management expertise, which somehow has been ignored in the country. And again, technology can enable, help perform various measures which can save lives, prevent damage to asset or individual, and also overall improve the quality of life. For example, we know the air quality issues across, and I know again technology can play a very important role, just the
Right.
way technology is helping us forecast weather,
Right.
right, through satellite
Yeah.
imagery. So I think all of these things play a very important role. You need to find a way to link these to our business models so that we actually make use of it. I think COVID has enabled this uh, acceleration, which was missing earlier,
Right.
uh, and which, as a result of this, has happened. And I think everybody is now conscious and is investing in technology. If not, businesses will be left out, Nimish, in my opinion. It has to be now.
Right. One last question on the business section, Sanjay, and I'm already running short of time right now over here because I get so engrossed listening to you. There is no way I can shun some of these questions. So the sector is still considered very litigious. Do you think? I mean, is there a view you have on the need for dispute resolution services and the persistent challenges of anarchy in contract management?
The reason you're right, the environment is very litigant, and the single most important aspect is whether the laws are in place, whether the laws are not subject to diverse interpretation.
Right.
Uh, so that's the most important thing. So very, very old laws have not gone through reforms, and there has to be a kind of a tsunami of reforms when it comes to, uh, from land titles to digitization of records to every other possible aspect related to state government, central government policies associated with real estate. So that's clearly the most important thing. I believe, except for REITs, where SEBI was able to roll out a very comprehensive, clear policy, getting first time right. I've never seen any policy first time right, whether it is RERA, whether it is, uh, you know, SEZs, you go back in history, or indeed many other aspects of it. There is always some clarifications required after time a budget is announced, and then the world is confused for a week
Yeah.
or what the interpretation of that budget is. I
Right.
think
Absolutely.
we have to overcome this. We have to simplify law.
Yeah.
That's key to stop litigation. The second is, of course, resolvement. I don't think we have, we've experienced during COVID, we may have built 1,000-bed hospitals, but if you don't have doctors and nurses, how would
Right.
you provide uh,
True.
treatment? And I feel exactly the same way with our judicial system. So the consumer court, RERA court, NCLT, there is confusion under which route should I go and
True.
resolve as a consumer. So some direction on that is vital. And if RERA has been a great initiative, why not establish real estate related litigations under RERA,
Right.
barring of course
Absolutely.
FDI and land title related? And how can we ensure that the state government gives the title assurance? And
Right.
we are still in primitive world where releasing an advertisement in the newspaper is the only way to safety of good title, which you and
Right.
I know does not give you clear title. It gives you an
True.
illusion that there will
Yeah.
be no takers of my title or disputing the title of the property. So I think these
True.
are few areas which I think we need to address, uh, and it will be a long way. I hope it happens sooner, but it will still be a long way in my opinion.
On that question, Sanjay, Tata's in the past has utilized and they've experimented with new models of contracting, such as alliance contracting or partnership contracting. Do you think there is a space for those kind of contracting methods now in India, given that we are seeing possibly 100% FDI coming into the sector? And do we have those professionals who understand and can administer these contracts properly?
I believe they are professionals who understand the any kind of such models. The foundation of the business is based on transparency. When
Right.
two parties come together, the foundation is transparency and respecting each other's view and identifying their core areas. So there has to be a
Right.
very clear role between the partners.
Right.
I found it is during the transition and implementation stage that they don't pay attention to these models of alliance, etc. Because they
Right.
think that once you've rolled it out, eventually the dust will settle on its own. And that is the beginning of the end, Nimish,
Right.
because nothing happens unless you have very clear programs of implementing transition and setting the two organizations into one SPV and rolling it out. And that's where I think we have failed.
Right. Sanjay, I'll hold on to my segment three, because most of the questions which I've been receiving from the audience is around business side. So if you allow me to continue on the business side, I'll continue to ask those questions. And some of them are pretty interesting ones. I'm amazed at the kind of clarity which people want to have from a leader like yourself. So first question, with India's second REIT, Mindspace Business Parks exponentially oversubscribed and doing very well. Uh, and also Tata Realty gearing up for their own REIT. I don't know, Sanjay, that's a news which people have it now completely. Do you think it is high time for a residential REIT so that developer could monetize existing unused, unsold inventory into rental assets such as student housing, co-living, rental apartments, etc.? And shouldn't the government lay more concrete guidelines for a residential REIT? Is there an is there an appetite for such REITs?
So, what I was saying is the simple answer is it's premature, Nimish. And the reason is very simple. It's premature because the interest rates in India are very high and the residential
Mhm.
yields are very low. And there is a delta between commercial and residential. So if commercial gives you 8 yield, residential gives you 2 or less. If you
Mhm.
take current market value of residential, not historical values of residential.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
as a result of this, uh, it will be impossible when you do highest and best use study. If I've got capital and I want to run a profitable business, the yields are higher in commercial, so why would I invest in residential?
Right.
Now, residential will become attractive, I believe, in financial capital or those micro markets where the job creation is the highest and speculative development, which means supply reduces and more people want to rent and more people get an environment where they get their laundry service, their work from home, their technology, their data points. So homes are more designed to enable them to function more professionally and efficiently. When those business models come in, then there would be an opportunity for organized players to do specific developments on rental model and then perhaps do a listing. Now, the only reason why service apartments have done well under hospitality function is because the rack rates are 5,000 rupees to 15,000 rupees a night. You
Mhm.
cannot expect that in a residential development.
Right.
Uh, but if the cost of capital and if the designated zone by state governments where they want to encourage rental housing and they subsidize the FSI to make the businesses viable, then it can become. The other business model can be, Nimish, that if you have a large development, you do a mixed use development. So you leverage the commercial upside as a result, residential rental yield play. And so it is complementary, just the way retail hospitality is complementary to office park, and walk to work could be complementary as well. So when you do the blended return of your development, that could be another way of making this work.
One interesting question on the same line, Sanjay, is around the unsold inventory. So the question which has been asked interestingly is, what are the strategies Tatas are using to drive the number of customer bookings in this environment when customer sentiment is very low, people are losing their jobs and have a huge sense of insecurity? So what is that you've been able to do successfully, Sanjay?
All developers in India, and so has Tata Housing and Tata Value Homes and Tata Realty Infrastructure across 20 projects of ours, have leveraged our deep relationship with channel partners. They bring in 80% of the revenue, and you need to understand what channel partners need. We realize we need to give them the pitch books in the new disrupted world. How do we ensure through digital experiences, and how do we quickly change our processes to enable ease of doing business between a customer, channel partners, and the residential development entity? And that has led to a significant rise in sales. Of course, nowhere close to a pre-COVID era, but to be able to achieve 40% sale, we've had 200 crore worth of sales in a recent quarter, which I did not expect, to be honest, because no customer is able to come to site. But we then realized that we used to sell real estate to non-resident Indians. If we could remotely sell to non-resident Indians, why can't we sell to resident Indians?
Right.
Give same comfort and feel. The second thing I believe is India has a very high ready-to-move inventory, Nimish. So customers are assured that it's ready. There is occupancy. So the risk to them is low, and that is also helping Tata Housing to do more sales, because no GST and no risk of development take longer.
Right. So there is a student who's asking what we as students must focus on to improve our chances of becoming better professionals in this sector, especially after this pandemic.
I have a simple rule in my life. Whatever my boss gives me, whether at home or in the office, I have to deliver 120% of the performance. So if you're not delivering 120% of the target, then you're not a high performance individual. And I'm telling you, if you're not a high performance individual in the new world, your chances of growth are minuscule. You will be labeled as mediocre. And if you're not, groomed to navigate during disruptions and challenging times, then you're not set out for the new world. So, and I'm trust me, I tell you that there is nothing that none of you can't. It's a state of mind. There is nothing to fear. You need to make sure that you make the best possible effort and keep trying it, and you will get it.
Thank you, Sanjay. There's one more thing which people are asking, and there is a connected question also, but it's a very interesting one. Since your organization is quite determined towards affordable housing as well and overall community development, what are your views on responsible real estate development and towards its adoption in Indian real estate market? As still there are major gaps in Indian real estate development process, which needs to be acknowledged by the industry. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing a word and a younger fellow saying responsible real estate development.
No, it's a very important question and a very relevant question. The world wants to build affordable homes, but in the last few years, state governments have increased minimum wages by 20–30%. Steel cost has gone up. The cost of doing business, we have touched upon ease of doing business. I'm talking about cost of doing business has gone up. The cost of compliance, adherence has gone up. But the cost of accountability on other stakeholders of the real estate business, which also includes government, that has not improved to the extent that is required. All that has led to not being able to address the affordable needs of the larger public, which we need to address. At Tata Housing and Tata Value Homes, we have tried to address various price points from 20 lakh rupees to 35 lakhs and then 45 lakhs to 1 crore. We believe that unless the government gives a substantial incentive, not just tax benefits, but at the state level, faster approval, faster delivery, faster and lower values of land, it will not be viable. And I'm being very candid. That's why there is a gap. However, in the what we call an aspirational affordable segment, Tata Housing and Tata Value Homes have tried to deliver.
Online, sir.
So I was saying at Tata Housing and Tata Value Homes, we have kept no difference between affordable and luxury, because we believe every citizen should get green buildings, healthier environment, so club and amenities. There may be a difference in variation of size, but we want to give every citizen. So that's, I think, the ethos of Tata as a group provides for it, and we give equal weightage. In fact, some of our affordable homes in definitions of local micro markets will be called luxury homes. That is the quality
that's true.
we give in our affordable segment.
And that, I believe, is, I think, defining responsible real estate also, to make sure that you actually deal with nobility as well.
I think you need to be even more careful. I think you need to ensure that the post-sale, that the experience of the customer has to be superior, and the maintenance cost has to be low, because that is being a responsible citizen, because they cannot afford to pay high maintenance cost. You know, some of them may be moving from slums to a 1-bedroom, for example, and there is at a certain stage of their life that they, over a period of time, perhaps they would be able to do it. So that's the only way we can be inclusive real estate development company, which Tata Housing and Tata Value Homes has done so far.
Right. There is one more question on what we just started our interaction with Sanjay, is on the urban situation. And if you're looking at this, you were talking about the state governments and the urban local bodies. Have we failed in our urban and regional planning as well? And what should be done now to try and basically resurrect some of those basic needs of whether these are roads or drainage or something which makes us live like human beings rather than being reduced to caricatures?
So I want to make a statement which may sound slightly defensive, but it's very important. I can tell you that if Sydney had 16 million square feet of office absorption every year for 20 years, they would have same infrastructure issues as Bangalore does. If New York had 6 to 9 million square feet of absorption of office, which means so much of construction, they would have had same infrastructure issues. I think it's the pace of development in India which has taken the state governments by surprise. So that is one, in the defense of the state government. Second, I think there is a clear lack of conviction to create master plans for 30 to 40 years. No state has, in my opinion, till date, has presented a 30-year infrastructure plan. They may have need a blueprint.
Right.
But when I say plan, it has to be backed by financial funding. It can't be a
Right.
beautiful presentation and no funding being backed. So I believe that is one. The second is the town planners have to play a very responsible role to identify the social gaps in the master plan of a city.
Right.
The social infrastructure, the schools, hospitals. Look at the COVID situation. We are short of hospitals. It's a realization which has happened now. The same thing goes with schools and colleges. People are fighting over seats. Even if at 98% you click, you're still wondering whether I'll get the admission or not. Back in
Right.
your
Right.
and my days, Nimish, we used to do it with 65 and 75%,
Absolutely,
and
sir.
college admission. So I think we need to do that, and I think that is something where we have failed. I think this between the center and the state, there has to be a strong partnership, even if it means privatization.
Hmm.
Airport is a wonderful example. The Airport Authority
Right.
of India has rolled out privatization, and we have
Right.
nice airports now.
Right.
Why can't we do it with railways? Why can't we do it? And
Absolutely.
why do we have to have Ministry of Defense, railways, amass, and Port Trust of India amass so much of land? Why can't that land be made available for development? Why can't privatization can help build infrastructure and not
Right.
as an afterthought, but as a initial stages? And I must tell you, everybody has spoken for last 70 years about Chandigarh, so I don't want to give that example.
Right.
But Maharashtra, Sitco was established, and Navi Mumbai Municipal Corporation, where the infrastructure was created ahead of time.
Right. Right.
But they did not create connectivity, they did not create school and colleges, and it was an industrial environment, so it failed. And even after 20 years, it is now moving in that direction. So I think you need a comprehensive plan and bring all stakeholders under one nodal agency to be able to have jurisdiction on town planning, corporation, PWD, and all the other departments of the government with one single authority to be able to execute. So there is a structural need, which is a gap, and then comes the funding. For some
Right.
reason, and I think it was Planning Commission long time ago, most of the revenue that various state governments collect goes in paying salaries.
Hmm.
So there is very little left. So I think there is something wrong
So
there.
yesterday's figure there, sir, if I can just add to that, when I got to know this, the figure which goes in the salaries alone is roughly about 55 to 57%, sir. That's the amount of salaries which governments are paying.
That's true. So I think that needs to be structurally addressed, in my opinion.
Yeah. And one last question on the business, sir, before I loosen it up a bit with some interesting ones again. Uh, and this is, as you talked about airports being revamped and railway stations could be revamped. Is there a possibility of revamping some of or repurposing some of our retail spaces or buildings which are lying unused for, let's say, data centers or for hybrid working or for that matter, some mixed use, an innovative idea which can basically repurpose those unused spaces? And if you know Gurgaon, sir, there is a mall mile, 21 malls are there and hardly one or two are making money. So they should be thinking out of the box to try and repurpose their buildings. Is there a case for that?
There is a very strong case for that. I remember meeting a global CEO for a very large company called Simons in London
Hmm.
many
Hmm.
years ago. And I was selling the India story. His name, I think, if I remember correctly, is Hans Mortner.
Hmm.
Uh, and he told me, smiling at me, Sanjay, we know India is growing, but I will come 10, 12 years later when the cherries are on the floor, and I will pick up those cherries and I will use that as opportunity. And it was surprising for me at that time, but now that I can relate to, that excessive development, herd mentality, no demand supply dynamics, or understanding of the business and the consumerism and changing landscape of retail has led to many of these developments rendered not fit for purpose,
Right.
but it can be repurposed. I think the state governments have to come out with FSI incentives. So let's look at Connaught Place, Barakhamba Road, Nariman Point, MG Road of Bangalore. These three.
Right. Right.
All of them had fair FSI.
Right.
Why even today the FSI is still there? So if you want to redevelop Barakhamba Road, Nariman Point, and MG Road of Bangalore, you have to give at least 8 FSI
Right.
as an incentive for redevelopment
Right.
or repurposing, but it doesn't exist. So it's a partnership between.
Yeah, so I was able to merge a lot of audience questions into it, and you were just talking about the repurposement. I think that's a very valid point, sir. The government should understand that they have to have differential set of rules so that some of these eyesores, if they are lying somewhere, can be repurposed for a betterment or create some sort of a CBD which looks similar to Manhattan or some of those places which have got a unique identity of their own.
Nimish, I want to say one self-initiated statement for the government, state
Sir,
governments rather.
right,
There was a time when developers used to make very high margins.
right,
I want to convey to all that the margins now are a single digit. They're not
wow,
high in real
right,
estate developments. And you can
right,
see that with the listed companies, if you will.
right,
So please remove the perception that developers are minting money and therefore we should tax them and
yeah,
we should charge them high premiums.
right, sir,
The real estate development industry now needs support from the government
yeah,
to revive the sector, to make them viable. I
yeah,
can tell you that many projects are unviable, Nimish. They will
yeah,
not happen. And they will not happen because the premiums are high, time taken is long, cost of capital is high, and the regulatory time that it takes is high. Uh, so it's not going to work, and that will stall the economy. So it's very important that every state government understands that there are no high margins in real estate development anymore, and that you can see in the registrations and the
right.
number of developers that have not listed or launched in last 2 years. It's a good signal for them.
Thank you. Sanjay, I'll possibly ask questions which, if you can answer them very shortly, trying to loosen it up. What is it like to carry a huge brand on your shoulders, Sanjay? You are carrying minimum 3 companies of Tatas and a brand which enjoys such a great brand loyalty and equity in the market, not just in India, outside India. What is it like to carry that huge load on your shoulders?
Immense responsibility. The expectations of customers is of a sovereign.
Wow.
So if you look up to central bank, RBI, if you're putting money in a bank, you know the RBI is assuring you that the money will not be lost. That is the expectation of a customer from the brand. And therefore, carrying that responsibility is huge. The
Yeah.
second thing is the values, the integrity, the governance. Uh, we need to preserve those and, in fact, exceed those if we can. And that is extremely demanding in a very disrupted environment. So I think that's a very important aspect. But I'm very fortunate that all of this is enabled by the management leadership that I have. So 100% support and assistance at all times enables me to function.
Thank you, Sanjay. One couple of last questions, and the penultimate one is when you hire a person, you look at him for look at in that person certain traits. what are those traits which you look forward in hiring an employee, and what do you think are the traits which are lacking in current set of leaders whom you're trying to hire right
The most important is the core personality traits.
now? Right.
And those core personality traits are very important, which means you have to respect the other professional,
Yeah.
appreciate their point, listen, speak when you need to, some very basic
Yeah.
principles that you expect. Then most important beside this is the integrity,
Yeah.
the ethics. I'm not saying that people don't have it, but perhaps
Yeah.
they don't understand the full meaning of integrity. For
Integrity.
example, if you were to run a quiz, and you will find that even though they have the intent of integrity, but they will take certain decisions which they thought were aligned with integrity, but they were not.
Yeah.
So you have to be extremely sensitive to people. Third is collaboration. Uh, Western style management requires collaboration, combined
Right.
stakeholders coming together and doing it. So I think all of these are extremely important for them.
Thank you, Sanjay. One last question and slightly personal one. Is the next generation of that family planning to join the built environment sector? And what is your advice to them as a father?
All both of my children are absolutely independent. I, just like my parents, I've imposed nothing on them, but they are naturally have grown seeing the built environment, and they are looking at it very keenly. In fact, my daughter is already into a built environment while she's doing law. Her name is Achwera. She's doing brilliantly well, but I think she will decide in the coming future. I would never ever impose anything on them, because I would like them to be passionate about what they want to do, and I
Right.
want them to be driven in what they want to do. Uh, and I would also want them to enjoy things that I missed. I want them to have it. And then I want to make sure that as a family, we are able to celebrate whatever little that we may have accomplished over the years, and continue to do so. The success of the children, which to every parent matters the most, right? You're a
Yeah.
successful parent only as your children are. And if I'm able to transfer strong value, into them, I would consider myself successful, along with my wife, who's played a very important role to keep them grounded, which is extremely important. Everybody has to start from the bottom, and if they start from the bottom and earn their way up, I think that's the most valuable, lesson that you can give to your children.
Sanjay, I don't think, I mean, we just crossed 90 minutes, and I still believe that there is a lot I can talk to you and a lot I can hear from you, but I'm conscious of your time. And thanks a lot, Sanjay, to giving not
Thank you.
just that generous time for us today, but for being there as the flag bearer of professionalism, transparency in the sector, trying to bring in those right set of changes, not just within the organization, but for others to learn from you and the government to listen from you, to listen and try and adopt some of those changes to make sure that we have a beautiful nation ahead of us, Sanjay. We are so proud to have a leader like you amongst us, who's
Thank you.
bringing in
You're too
that kind of a
generous.
change which is going to have a lasting impact on the built environment sector. With that, I come to a close of this exciting session, a very deep knowledge session by Sanjay on and a good peeking into his own personal side and professional side as well. Sanjay, one last statement, one phrase you would like for all of us as an audience to take away and possibly enjoy our evening today with.
I believe, God has given enough to celebrate. If you enjoy your present, the future is secured. Uh, do not come under stress, because these are very difficult times. You embrace it, but there is absolute assurance that there is a far better life waiting for you. I've seen it in my life. I had very modest beginning and expectations, and I'm grateful for what I've been given over the years by everybody. I think all of you will have much higher accomplishments that I would have, because that's the size of the economy will grow from 3 trillion to 5 to 6 trillion, and you will have far more fulfilling life that any one of us have ever enjoyed.
Thank you, sir. Even though we lost Sanjay in the end, I think these were great statements to take away with us. Look forward to catching up with you in person also, Sanjay. And there are quite a few people who have written on chat that they would want to spend some time with you. All right.
Thank you,
Actually,
Nimish.
thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Once again, I was saying that there are people on the chat who have written that they would want to have a privilege of meeting up with you. I think
Be honest.
you possibly will try and make another hero by the same name for the
No,
industry now.
thank you. You're too generous. Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Sanjay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.